This is the Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board interview with Theresa Thibodeau, who is a Republican candidate for governor of the state of Nebraska. Theresa, thank you so much for being with us today. Kent, why don't you introduce yourself as a member of the editorial board, and then we will launch into our questions.
Yeah, I'm Kent Walgamot, and I write about arts and entertainment for the Journal-Star, and I've been on the editorial board for 12 years.
Good to meet you, Kent.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so Theresa, this is an interesting time in our nation politically. It doesn't look like it's that much fun to be a politician right now. So why do you want to be the governor? And then what experiences and attributes do you have that you think will qualify you for that role?
And you're absolutely correct. As we look at the political climate all over, we just see divisiveness across the board. We see a lot of, strong language, fighting at each side. And I want to bring a sense of normalcy back to that and be the one who is running for governor because this is about Nebraska, not about any one individual or leaving a legacy. It's really about moving our state forward and doing it in a responsible, common sense way, and not trying to put Band-Aid fixes on things or trying to do something all at once. And my experiences lend me to be qualified because there's so many different things that go into being governor in so many areas that you need to deal with. So for instance, I've worked in human resources, so I can build and lead teams. I've worked on the corporate side and I've managed multi-million-dollar accounts. I've also had the pleasure of staying home with my children for a little bit. And I understand what moms and families are going through on a day-to-day basis. I then opened my own business, and I had about 180 children enrolled in my private preschool and childcare, and I employed 48 employees. So I know what it's like to be a business owner, a small business owner, where you're pretty much anything and everything, and managing those employees and building those relationships and a cohesive team to work together. I've also served in the legislature, so I do know how state government works and how the governor needs to interact with the state senators. I've served on the City of Omaha Personnel Board, so I've looked at union contracts and seen those negotiations and how those work out. I've also sat and listened to employees who were not happy with their termination, and they were fighting that. I've also sat on the juvenile justice nominating committee, so I know what it's like to interview potential judges and send them up to the governor for recommendation. And those are all the quality experiences that I've had because, gosh, the governor is dealing with so many different departments, and I've dealt with quite a few of them. DHHS oversaw my business. Health department oversaw my business. And it's knowing how to interact in a respectful way and seeing what works and doesn't work within those agencies.
All right, thank you. So Nebraska has been a state that seems to have valued local control on issues, but at times that seems to be, that principle seems to be somewhat inconsistent in some areas. Education, land use, the public health policy. What are your thoughts on local control, and do you see inconsistencies in our state government now?
I have seen it, and that goes back to having those great experiences on serving in different boards. And I am all for local control. But what I do see happening a lot of times is the state will say, yes, you have local control, but then they go in and they tell cities or counties what they have to do. And then they don't tell them how they're going to pay for it. And it's my opinion that if there is a breakdown in local control, that's where the state could come in and be of assistance. However, I don't believe in the state, sending down unfunded mandates, telling local municipalities what they have to do, and then not telling them how they're going to pay for it. And that's where a lot of times we will end up in the property tax fight, because the local municipalities are trying to pay for mandates from the state and they don't know how to pay for it. So a lot of times they'll have to increase their levy or add a little bit of a sales tax on the city level, or we've seen restaurant taxes come in. And it's my opinion that, if your local leaders are not performing well, or they're raising your taxes, it's the voters' responsibility to then replace them with somebody that they feel would do a better job. The other areas on education there's some local control and some not. So we have our State Board of Education, which I am in support of, but they should be more of an advisory board, more of a board when we're looking at, I think last I saw 41% of our children are graduating not proficient. I believe the State Board of Education's job would be to find out why, help those local school boards find out why and what changes need to be done to make sure our children are graduating proficient in those core subjects, instead of trying to find other things to shove down on school boards when, gosh, all of our schools and teachers and students are suffering so much now anyway.
Okay. I think there's one thing people seem to agree on is that we have a crisis in our corrections department. What we don't have much agreement on is how do we solve it? What are your priorities in finding a solution or solutions?
Well, and I've said it before and nobody likes to say it, but we are going to have to build a new prison. But that does several things for us. It does increase our bed capacity. As we build a new prison, that new building can also bring in more area and space to bring in more resources for those prisoners if they're looking at drug addiction or mental illness. And one thing that a lot of people don't talk about is when somebody is getting ready to be released from prison and we want to help them get back into the workforce, sometimes we do have to go back and retrain the basic skills of getting up on time to an alarm, just those basic everyday skills that someone needs in order to then go into the workforce after release. A new prison could offer those solutions. In addition to that, the current prison is so outdated, it is causing unsafe work environments. And when we look at people who are satisfied with their jobs, money and salary, yes, that's a part of it. But another part of it is just workplace satisfaction and having a good, safe working environment for those corrections officers or parole officers or whomever needs to walk into that prison does a whole lot to help keep and attract employees.
All right. So another thing that people seem to agree on is that our tax system could use some tweaking, some major reforms somewhere on that continuum. Where do you think the state needs to go as far as tax reform? And if it includes tax cuts, where should the money come from?
Well, first and foremost, we have to address property tax. Year after year, the legislature will put more money into that property tax relief fund, but it really is not enough to just relieve that burden on small business and farms. And one of the ideas, or a few of the ideas I have first, is to bring in a private audit group and do an audit in every level of state government and find the waste and cut it out. And it will work. It worked in Texas, and you can do it in a friendly way without making anybody mad. Hey, departments, they want to cut waste if they have it. Sometimes they just don't know where to start. And we could find millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, a few examples just recently, we saw unemployment paid out over more than $40 million in unemployment claims that shouldn't have been paid out. Then we have had the state overpay people who, were getting their retirement or their pension fund, but they had been deceased for, 7-10 years. And it's things like that that an audit firm could catch that would save us millions of dollars. My other idea is that the state will need to uphold their constitutional duty to fund the public schools. And if we fund the schools per child, then we don't get in a position that we're in now where one portion of the state is receiving more funding for their children than another portion. And in order to pay for that, we can certainly look at some of these service exemptions. There's service exemptions out there that really just serve special interests. And I think getting rid of those service exemptions would be the right way to go. Not adding any new taxes, but taking away some of those exemptions.
Okay. Do you believe efforts to investigate the 2020 elections in Nebraska are warranted? And then do you support efforts to change the state's election law and procedures? And if you do, how do you propose doing that without suppressing or votes or disenfranchising voters? Complicated question there.
I know, that's all right. Well, I am always for voter verification and looking to see if there are any abnormalities. Moving forward, what I would like to see is voter ID for sure. That's going to make a huge impact. And pretty much everyone has an ID these days because you need an ID for almost anything. And we can move forward easily with that. I would like to see the drop boxes cracked down on, at least if anything, having security on them so you can see who's coming and going. But really, there's no need for those drop boxes. People can get to their polling places or they can get to the election commissioner. Now, in some of our more rural areas, we have to stick with all mail-in balloting because it is a long drive to get to the election commission, and that's okay. But on the mail-in ballots, I would like to see that there's a copy of their photo ID included with that mail-in ballot. The other areas we can look at is in our state, ballot harvesting technically is legal. There's really not a good statute that addresses ballot harvesting, and we can button that up as well. I've also looked at other states, and for instance, New York, Delaware, their early voting is only allowed 10 days prior to election day. And I think that's a good idea as well. As we all know, things change in elections, and we just want to give people enough time to research their candidates and also not a lot of time for people to go out and harvest ballots and things like that. So I think a 10-day early voting would be accurate and reasonable.
All right. Should the legislature scrap nonpartisanship? And if no, how could you help make the nonpartisan legislature less partisan?
Well, I haven't seen any efforts to scrap the nonpartisanship.
Well, there was a bill.
There was, but it didn't go anywhere. At this point in time, the legislature is partisan anyway. And so we might as well just have it out there and have people know. I mean, that comes back to transparency and knowing who you're voting for. However, if we don't get there, then the governor has to be able and willing to work with a nonpartisan legislature. And my ideas for that is you sit down with people and first and foremost, you figure out what you agree upon, because everybody has something that they agree upon and a goal that they agree upon that they want to get to. And at the end of the day, you can work together to achieve those goals. There will be items that you never will agree upon, and you just accept that. And when I was in the legislature, I did that. I worked with, some Democratic senators on some bills. Others, we were debating on the legislature floor the day before, but we still had that respectable professional relationship. And that's the culture that I'd like to see get back into the legislature.
Do you worry that more partisanship will result in less transparency because the parties are kind of making deals behind the scenes, or is that a concern?
No, that's not a concern. I think those happen regardless, and they happen amongst parties too. So that's something that is just something in politics that you deal with. I personally don't like, behind the door agreements, but it is something that happens, and it's just something that people should be aware of and acknowledge.
All right, well, I'm down to my last question, but that means Kent's got to jump in because my question has to be the last question. So Kent, fire away.
Back on the taxation thing, just to clarify, so you'd be in favor of just getting rid of the TIOSA formula altogether and just X amount per student goes to a district?
Yes. Yeah. I think TIOSA should just go away completely.
Okay. My other question is about water projects and specifically the two giant proposals of the canal from Colorado off the Platte and the Big Lake. The first one seems to me to be a legal nightmare, but I'd like to hear what you think about those.
Well, I would say that maybe not a legal nightmare, because we do have that 1923 compact, and currently Colorado is really threatening us, and it is a threat to our water. And we're not asking for more water that's allotted to us, but we are ensuring that Colorado can't take the water. And as we build that canal, it is very helpful, because as we look now, we may be going into a huge drought this summer. It would be able to have reservoirs so that the farmers could still irrigate in those times of huge droughts, because gosh, they have enough that they're facing right now with not only taxes, but fertilizer and regulations. If we could at least relieve the question of water and how they're going to irrigate their land, I think that would be very helpful to them. On the Ashland Lake, I know that they are going to do a study, which is good. I think that is smart of them to do. I would like to see the results of that study. I'm a little bit more reluctant to hop right on and say, yay, go for it, because we do have other beautiful areas in our state that are just right there and ready. And I truly believe that we need to invest in all of our states. So from the east to the west and the north and the south, because if we want to have an economically sound state, the entire state needs to be healthy.
All right. Well, thank you. And so the final question, Theresa, is what have we not asked you that you wish we had?
Oh, I always just love that question. I would just say, why I know you asked me a little bit about why I was interested, but a little bit about what differentiates me, because everybody knows we have the top three candidates, and a lot of times, sometimes I get mentioned, sometimes I don't. But as we go around the state and we go to forums, the thing that differentiates me is I know the questions that people are asking me, because I've traveled the state and I've listened. And because of my diverse experience over the years, I've listened and talked to so many families, and connected with them. I empathize with them, and I understand what people are going through. So I guess for me, instead of spending millions and millions of dollars on silly ads, I'm out there, I'm learning, I'm researching, I'm reading, I learn every day, because that's what a governor needs to do. And that really differentiates me from the rest of the field.
All right. Well, you have a few more minutes if you had anything else you wanted to say, Theresa, but if not, we really appreciate your answering these questions for us and the effort you're putting into running for office. I have a lot of respect for anybody who's willing to stick their neck out and want to serve the public. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Hey, and it's for our state, so it's for a great cause.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Theresa. We'll end the recording and wish you the best.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.